Shwetank. He's
the actual session. We took over mine last time.
the full Shwetank, 100%. Shwetank is from Opera. He's what many of us want to be, right? Web evangelist, right? And his job is to interface with the developers outside and tell what his product is doing. And today he's going to speak on CSS, right? Okay. So Shwetank, all the way from Chandigarh.
Actually, it's more about what the web is doing. I don't want it to be a product pitch, so I'll talk just about the code. This will be all about CSS3. I have a slight disagreement with which was said earlier. We in Opera believe CSS3 is a little bit different than what you call HTML5. This is because we want to differentiate what has been referred to as a standard practice, which is differentiating content from presentation, right? So the HTML5 specification, we're not talking about geolocation and stuff like that. We're just talking about the strict specification. Is all about the content, right? And CSS3 is all about the presentation, the sexy graphics and all that kind of stuff, right? So Apple released, an HTML5 demo site which only worked in Safari, for example. It was all basically just CSS3. It didn't really have that much of HTML5 in the first place, right? And they were severely hammered from all quarters, including even Mozilla, for example, right? So don't confuse CSS3 with HTML5, the content, right? But when we talk about HTML5 in general, we also include CSS3. But technically speaking, it's not part of HTML5. Let's start at that. Canvas is not part of CSS. Canvas, the tag is part of HTML5. The APIs to do whatever you want, like Bezier curves or something like that, that's part of the different specification, right? So it has nothing to do with CSS. Canvas is programmable graphics. So you program, it's just like an IMG element, right, in which you program the pixels using JavaScript. So just a short introduction. I don't think I've introduced myself actually. So my name is Shwetank Dixit. I work in developer relations as a web evangelist for Opera Software. I've been doing this for about 3 years now. I'm also part of the W3C. I'm right now working in a group called Mobile Web for Social Development. And I'm also part of the WASP ILG, which is a global network of developers evangelizing standards. Okay. So I chose this talk to be about CSS3 because CSS in general is very close to our hearts as Opera. Why? Because, well, this is a photo of our CTO back in the early 90s at MIT Media Lab, where he proposed the original recommendation for cascading style sheets. So CSS in general is his baby. He wants it to be there, This is his photo from the front. Not the full photo because, well, I want it to be mysterious. But the thing is that the web has come a long way since the early 90s, right? One interesting piece of trivia is that we talk about CSS3, but the work on CSS3, the actual, standards process, that the work had actually started during the time of CSS2. They both started in parallel. It's just that the work on CSS2 was so much that browsers said that, okay, we'll do CSS2 first, and then we'll go on to CSS3. Right? But the work almost started in parallel. Right? One more difference, this was a similarity, but the difference between CSS3 and CSS2 is that CSS2 is actually one whole document. Right? The whole specification is one whole document. CSS3 is modular. Right? In CSS3 there are various specifications for each and everything. It's not one document. It's modular. So people or browsers can take each and every different thing and implement it at their own thing, at their own pace. Right? So why should you as a designer care about CSS3 in the first place? Right? So various things which are really new and really exciting in CSS3. First is rounded corners that we'll talk about. Second is you can use any font you like inside a web page. You can kind of animate things in a way as well inside CSS3. You can do drop shadows and box shadows. We can do making stuff translucent or transparent, and you can have a way to code once in one CSS file and have it display properly no matter what the resolution. And we'll talk about all these things There are a bunch of other things in CSS3 as well. Unfortunately, we have only 1 hour. So the first thing I have to talk about is rounded corners, those sweet, sweet rounded corners. Right? For example, you have this Twitter in which you can see all these rounded corners, all that sexy goodness. Right? So how do you do this? Previously, you had to use 4 images, 1 for each corner, and do it inside a div. Right? So you had basically 3 extra divs, right? And it added to the code soup, right? As people pointed out, unnecessary markup. Why is this bad? Because any unnecessary markup, any unnecessary code is bad, right? And this used to be done simply for the purposes of having 4 different rounded corners using images, right? Which is bad. So div soup is bad, right? And it makes developers sad. So instead of having that bad, redundant code, now you have rounded corners in which you can do this using pure CSS. So let's have a quick demo. So how do you do this? This is a quick demo. If you do this and see the code. I hope you can see the code, right? So if you want to do a rounded corner like this will be the code, right? Let's make all 4 corners like this. So now converted that square into a circle, right? So you can do all these kinds of things using only pure CSS, right? Which is pretty nice. So make border radius your friend. How do you do rounded corners? There's a particular CSS property called border radius, right? Make it your friend. Learn it, use it, love it, right? This is how you do cross-browser border radius, right? If you want to make a div have corners on all 4 sides, just use border radius. There are certain, for example, Firefox, from Firefox 4.0 onwards, it will support just border radius, right? So you should always have this. But for older Firefox browsers, it only supports this, Moz border radius. So use this for supporting older Firefox browsers. And for older Safari browsers, which use the WebKit engine, use WebKit border radius, right? But the key thing to keep in mind is everyone is moving towards standardization. So all these vendor prefixes like Moz and WebKit should be, I won't say avoided, but use them in conjunction with the standard ones, right? Border radius, right? So border radius, if you use just border radius, is supported on i9 beta, it's supported on Opera, it's supported on Chrome, it's supported on Safari, it's supported on Firefox. Right? So all major browsers, the newest versions support border radius. You can use them right now. Then we come to web fonts, right? So till before CSS3 came along, you could only use certain, like 6 fonts basically that you can only use on the web and have it maintained or guaranteed that it can display properly across all operating systems or all browsers, right? You couldn't really use your own font and have it guaranteed that the end user will see that same font, right, inside a web page. You couldn't do that. With CSS3 web fonts, this will be the case. So you will be able to use whichever font you like inside a web page, right? So it gives you the ability to use your own font on any web page. There are certain sites which are already doing this. For example, if you go to onda.com right now, you'll see this. Right? They use their own web fonts to make text more, not just more beautiful, but also more readable, right? So you can have much more typographic control, which is a great thing for designers, right? How many designers in the house? Right? So you'll love this. You'll love this fact that you can have much more typographic control over your web properties. This is a small demo of Hindi fonts being used with web fonts, right? So if you notice, these are all working in different ways. These are all looking different. This is the system default font, which isn't really displaying properly at all, right? But if you use it in conjunction with a web font like this, the Gargi font or the CTAC by Yogesh by CTAC, you can improve the legibility of the text. So when it comes to Indian languages especially, or regional languages in general, sometimes if you don't use web fonts, if you use just the system default, then sometimes it's very, very hard to read in certain systems. So in those cases, especially you can use web fonts to make it much more legible, right? So the main point that I'm trying to make is web fonts are not just for style, right? You can have, of course, you can have as many stylish fonts as you like on a web page, but readability is also important, right? So you can actually make use of web fonts to make the text more legible and readable, and this is particularly relevant in regional languages. Yeah.
What level of anti-aliasing does web font support? Because it still has that typical I-style and pixelate fonts, or support that the symmetry is a little stronger.
Yeah, so the question is like what level of anti-aliasing the web font supports. Like, the earlier version before CSS3, if you notice, all the text is clearly about the English. So all the text that we write, so all you can see those pixelated borders, and when it comes to like when the designer is designing, that time it's like they can have that fancy like nice curved text. So what level of that it gets supported by CSS3?
CSS doesn't define anti-aliasing. So it all has to be done by either the browser or the font itself. So you can use TTF or OTF fonts, and the whole responsibility of anti-aliasing will be done by the browser itself. So it really depends on which browser you're talking about. Yeah. So it really depends from browser to browser on this particular issue. CSS has nothing, the specification says nothing about anti-aliasing as such.
How these forms are rendered? I mean, you don't have these in the system forms, right? So is it like online?
Yes. So I'll show you the code how to do it. Okay. So you use a certain property called font face. Once again, learn it, use it, love it. Right? So what you do in font face is say, okay, font face, this is the URL of the TTF or OTF font, and this is what I'm going to call that font. Right? You say, src URL this.ttf and font family, the name that you want to provide that, right? That you're going to use, which is in this case my font. Then whenever you have to use that particular font, just say my font.
Sorry to interrupt, one small announcement in the interest of everybody in the room. We request people who are running tolerance to kindly close them down. Not that it will be running it might be running as a background process. We just kicked out 3 clients from the admin console, but we can't keep doing it again and again. The routers are crashing down. Please do make reduced use of torrent. Maybe we can do it during lunchtime.
Well, what he said? I couldn't really hear your question fully. Yeah, it's as good as calling an image. The only thing is, with an image, you couldn't select that text, right? You couldn't select that text. You can
I can do a background or a sprite image, keep the sprite image and keep rolling it, right?
Why do you want to do that when there is such very simple thing to do?
No, I'm just asking what is the difference, how maybe the size of it comes down.
Yeah.
It's again a HTTP request, right? So if I have, how does it load exactly?
So it takes that font and applies it to the web page.
Okay.
Right? The advantages over here is, first of all, images cannot scale. Right? This text can scale whatever you want. Secondly, you cannot copy or paste, that kind of images. You can't do this with text. Thirdly, once again, we're talking about accessibility. If an alt tag is not provided, alt attribute is not provided for an image, then screen readers will know nothing about that image. Right? With a text, it's just text. So we'll display it or announce it. Yeah. So you can make text more readable as well, more stylish. Depends on the browser. It depends on the browser. From browser, the CSS specification doesn't say that it has to be cached. It depends on the browser. So Opera, for example, it caches it, but it's not really that much of a problem. You can delete the cache. But if you reload it, within a particular time frame, 2 or 3 times, and once again, it'll load it fully.
So Shwetank, hi.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ravi. Just to continue on that font face question,
One is definitely fonts get cached. All browsers do it just like JavaScript resources, CSS, etc. The advantage of doing the font thing, first of all, it's a lot less bandwidth heavy. Once the font is loaded, you can use it across multiple pages.
That's once again depends on which language you are talking about. So in English, for example, typically font sizes are very, very less. But if you're talking about Asian languages, for example, these Asian language packs, for example, a language pack for Mandarin, a TTF file might even increase for 1 MB, right? So it really depends on whether you want to do that for Mandarin or not.
That's true, but it only loads once. And if you get your caching right, across your entire website, you'll be using the same font again.
Yes, so if you use HTML5 offline cache, for example, and you can cache that PDF file within the browser itself, then it's fine. Right? But the cache size is also limited by browser. So you can also set your own cache size. So if it increases that, goes beyond that cache size, then it will not be cached. So it's a tricky issue. You have to be careful when you talk about cache in browser.
Suppose we use a particular font which the particular system already has. So does it still download or does it use the font present in the system?
It still downloads, but I'm not really sure whether it uses the system font or not. I'm not really sure. If you specify it, then it should. I mean, I'm not really familiar with the whole algorithm, but if you specify something, then it will download. It should download from that particular way. Any more questions so far? Yeah.
So you mean to say that the font engines are basically inside the browser rather than the font is coming from the website? Like
Yeah.
The font engines are basically inside the browser.
The way to display that font is now coded inside the browser.
Because, for example, like CSS location, the font, now, if a language is English plus Hindi mix, like if I picture the movie name called Mr. Nankurlal, you have to display simultaneously. How do you display it?
So it will, yeah, so if that particular font only has support for one particular language, and if you use in between the mid, in mid-sentence you use some other language as well, then, it will display garbage characters in that case, right? So you have to choose, very, very carefully what's happening over here. If you choose a regional language font, then you have to make sure that that particular TTF file or OTF file, whatever, has support for not just that regional language, but also for English, right? So it really depends. You have to choose carefully. Yeah.
I'm not so sure that that's necessary, right, Shwetank, because the browser will pick the appropriate font for the character in question.
No.
Not always?
No, it doesn't. I've tried it, I know.
Oh.
Okay, so yeah, but some font files are malformed as well. That's the reality of the web. If the language is, yeah, so if the language says, it should, but it doesn't. So maybe it's a bug in browsers, you should file a bug report for that, or so one more thing to keep in mind, don't go overboard, don't go crazy with this, right? So it's a very, very exciting capability to have, ability to use whichever font you like inside a web page now. Don't go overboard, don't go crazy, make sure that text is still readable, people can still understand the text, make sense of what is happening, right? Use it for design purposes responsibly, right?
How do you solve the legal issues with that? Like font is
Very good question. So how do you solve the legal issues? With this CSS3 web fonts, you will not. But there's a new specification coming up called WOF, right? Web Open File Format or Font Format, right? So with WOF, you will be able to resolve these legal issues because you will be able to have an attribution of where that particular font came from and everything like that, right? So from right now, you have to be careful of whether that particular font, what license that font is under. Only use fonts which are under a proper license. If that particular font's license says that you cannot use this font for web pages, for example, then don't use this, right? So, but with the upcoming WOF standard, which isn't right now, but will be there prevalent in the future, you will be able to move around these legal issues as well. Any more questions, or should I move on? Okay. A quick word about the wasting, right? So everyone wants to make their designs translucent, for whatever reason. Not always, but sometimes. So how do you do this? Very simple. You just have an opacity property. The minimum value is 0, the maximum value is 1. The closer to 0 it is, the more transparent it becomes. The closer to 1 it is, the more opaque it becomes. Right? So you use it like this. Right? Very simple. There shouldn't be any questions, right? This is a small demo. I hope you can see this. So in the first one, the header is translucent. In the second one, you can't really see it, but actually the box is translucent. And in the image is a PNG, and over there, that's also translucent. Right? So that's pretty nice. Then you come to something really, really exciting. Probably, in my opinion, the most exciting thing about CSS3, which is transitions and transforms. So in transitions, what you do is you transition the state from one thing to the next. Right? For example, you can change the color of a particular element, you can change the background color or the width or height or whatever. And we'll see demos of this as well. Right? And transforms is more about rotating or scaling or skewing the elements. So transforms is more about that, and transitions is more about changing the inherent properties. This is how it's done. Don't be overwhelmed. It's just two things basically. We're just adding vendor prefixes, right? Because transitions and transforms right now are not supported in a standard way. We have to use vendor prefixes for it to be displayed properly on all browsers, right? So what you do is you first of all say which property you want to transform, right? In this case, I want to transform, transition. I want to transition the background color, right? I want to transition the background color and I want it to take 4 seconds, right? That's what I'm going to do. And how do I do this? I say, whenever someone hovers something, the background color should change to blue, right? This is a simple code. So whenever I hover over this, it will take 4 seconds and the background color will change, right? Very simple. It's nothing to be intimidated about. Just go, there are plenty of tutorials on the net as well. It's pretty nice.
So is automate available for all the elements?
For all, in this particular code example, it will be for all div elements.
I mean all the browsers?
Yeah. I, do you know? So I'm not really sure about I, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, this is a very, very big component of CSS3. They'll be crazy not to support this, right? So they will be working on this. I mean, you are working on this. I'm very sure about this. Okay, so the question is properties without these things. No, so vendor prefixes right now, the reality is if you want to make it work with Safari and Chrome, then you'll have to use WebKit transition, right? If you want it to make it work with Mozilla, then you have to use Moz transition. If you wanted it to make it work with Opera, then you have to use O transition, right? Because this is a very, very new feature that we are still working on, right? So once we're pretty sure of this feature, then we'll make it standard. So then we'll not be concerned about O or Moz or WebKit like that. You can just use transition. And you can also do timings, right? If you want to make sure that things are transitioned according to certain timings, you can also do that. This is not clear right now, but with this demo, it will be clear. Okay, so with this demo, what will happen is, there are different ways to make things transition, right? Different ways to do this. One is ease, one is linear, one is ease in. So if I hover over this, you'll see that they are all actually transitioning in different rates, different ways actually. But I don't know if you'll notice or not, but all of these bars reach the end at the exact same time. It may not seem like it, but all of these reach in the end at the exact same time. It's just one speeds up linearly, one speeds up very fast, then slows down, then goes fast once again. Right? So there are various ways to do this. Right? The ease in linear, ease out, ease in out. Right? You can apply all these effects as well.
Does it support equations like ease in exponential, ease in limit?
No. So these are all you have. So now we come to transforms, right? This was all about changing the width and height and background color and stuff like that. Now you come to transforms. Transforms is more about scaling and rotating, stuff like that. Instead of having an actual web page demo, I think it'll be best described using this image. So let me just come over here. This says transform, translate. Translating is about moving the element from one place to the next, right? Then you have scale. Scale is obviously you know what scale is, and rotate, you know what rotate is, right? So you can use this, and what will happen? The original element is this light blue one, right? This is the original place where it is. When you say translate ATPX, ATPX, then it'll move ATPX, ATPX. So this dotted thing, can you see this dotted thing over here? This dotted thing over here. You can see that? So that's where it becomes. Then you say scale 1.5, 1.5, so it becomes this. And then it goes to rotate 45 degrees, and it becomes this rotated one. Right? So you can do all that kind of stuff using transforms. It's clear, right? Any confusion? Kind of. There is a way in which you can use translations and transforms to kind of animate. It's a hack. Yeah, you can combine it with JS, for example, as well. But right now I'm not talking about anything about JS right now. Let's see a few code demos as well. So this is a small piece that I made. Let's hope it works. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is this thing. This is rotated about 45 degrees, I think. This is once again normal HTML5 video playing over here, which has nothing to do with CSS, by the way. Then you have this, right? There's no JS involved. I'm just doing on hover. It increases the height, right? That's it. So you now have a collapsible navigation menu using just CSS3. Pretty cool. There's another demo that one of my teammates made. So you have this, and click it. Some nice smooth animations going on with images as well. It's pretty sweet. So look more into transitions and transforms. It's very, very cool, and I'll encourage you to do it cross-browser. Don't just be obsessed with WebKit, right? Don't be just obsessed with Firefox. Test on all browsers, because nowadays all browsers are either working on it or support it, right? They just do it using their own vendor prefixes. So make sure you use all of those vendor prefixes. How many people have wanted to use drop shadows inside a web page? Right? Till now you had to use an image editor, Photoshop or something like that. But now you actually have stuff like text shadow and box shadow. So what you'll do is, suppose you have an element called content1. Just to text shadow, the X and the Y, right? Then you see the blur of that particular drop shadow and the color, right? For example, content1 would be something like this, the top one, this. I really don't know whether you can see. Okay, you can see, right? So these are using text shadow. Very, very simple. Any questions? This is the exact same way you use box shadows. So this was about text, and this is about boxes. So you can use box shadow to do the exact same thing. Have drop shadows on various divs, stuff like that. It's pretty nice. So someone created this small thing inside a web page, trying to emulate what Windows 7 would be like. Right? So it uses opacity, but also it uses, if you see the sides, you'll see box shadow, right? It's pretty exciting. You can do a whole lot of these things which will make the user interface much more lively, right? Then something of real value. What I've talked about so far was all the sexy stuff about CSS3, but this is the really useful stuff now. First is media queries. How many people know about media queries? Not a whole lot. actually. So media queries was, well, supported by Opera since 2007, but it's just recently that people are starting to have a buzz about media queries. Why? What does media queries do? Media queries makes you have different styles for different resolutions, which is very, very important when you consider the mobile arena. Right? When it comes to mobiles, you have absolutely no clue what your device resolution will be, what your screen size will be. It depends on phone to phone. Right? So if you're making a mobile website, it's a very, very difficult issue to manage. What do? There needs to be a way in which you say, okay, if it's this resolution, then give it this style sheet or this style. If it's that resolution, then give it that kind of style, right? It'll be nice to do that. This is exactly what happens with media queries. So this is the code, right? So it says media all, min width 480, max width 800px, and have all that specific style inside those curly brackets, right? So you have, it really doesn't matter which device is accessing that page. If its resolution falls between 480px and 800px, then the top style will be displayed. If it doesn't matter which device it is, if the width is less than 480px, then the second one will be displayed, right? So this is very, very, very useful when it comes to targeting different style sheets for different devices. Right? And it doesn't really matter which device it is, as long as the resolution, it supports matters. Okay, which mobile browser support? Well, the two most popular mobile browsers which support is iPhone and Opera Mobile. Right? These two already support CSS media queries. I think Chrome as well, but on mobile, but I'm not really sure about that. It does, right? So, yeah. So this was about media queries, very, very useful. But much more useful than that sometimes is CSS3 selectors. The reason why I included useful plus plus was because even in CSS2 you had selectors. So it was useful then, but in CSS3 we made it even more useful. Right? How? First of all, we have some attribute selectors now. So you can do something like this. In the first example, this will be applied only to links which link to Wikipedia. Right? If it's ahref is equal to http wikipedia.org, only then the text will be underlined. Right? All other things will not. The second one is alt caret is equal to the. Right? So if any image which has an alt attribute and the first word is the, right, then this style will be applied. Right? The third one is all star is equal to TV, which means that any image in which the alt attribute has the word TV in it, no matter where it is, this style will be applied. Right? So to me it seems a little bit gimmicky, even though it may have its uses. The much more useful stuff is this. You have something called first child, end child, last child. Right? So if, for example, if you have a list, right, and you only want the first list element to have a particular style, then you can use first child. Right? If you want the last element to have a certain style, then you can use last child. If you want every third element to have a particular style, this is much more useful. Then you do, ns child 3n, right? Or you can have, how many people are fans of those zebra tables or something like that? You can do that pretty easily with nth child 2n, right? So every other element will have that particular style. That's pretty useful.
Is this first child a part of CSS2?
No. No. As far as I'm aware, it's part of CSS3 and it's child. Yeah, it support. It must. I mean, yeah. It really doesn't matter whether it supports. What I'm talking about is the specification itself.
Is this a CSS3 specification?
I'm not sure. NH child definitely is.
No, I'm talking about
First child and last child, it may be the case that it might be CSS2. I don't know. But CSS NH child definitely is. That was what I really wanted to focus on. Yes, because I mean even Hover is a super class. Yeah, I mean I get your point. Right? So look on your own whether it's CSS2. It doesn't hardly matters nowadays. So it really doesn't matter whether it's CSS2 or 3. It really matters is you should be aware of this, and it gives you much more power in your designs. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, am I going on time? Okay. So is vendor prefixes, which I touched a little bit right now as well. So when it comes to vendor prefixes, you have to be very, very careful. You know, HTML5, the specification is a little bit different. But CSS3 is a minefield when it comes to cross-browser compatibility, right? So stuff like border radius, for example, there are many pages even now in existence which use just WebKit border radius, right? So even other browsers like Opera or IE, for example, were perfectly capable of displaying border radius, cannot, because the only thing which is mentioned over there is WebKit border radius, so it only applies to WebKit browsers, right? So you have to be very, very careful when it comes to CSS3, right? And have proper vendor prefixes for all of the engines. So Presto, which is for Opera, the O vendor prefix, the Moz vendor prefix, and the WebKit vendor prefix, as well as the standard one, right, for future compatibility. So something like this will be bad. WebKit transition property. Why? Because Mozilla or Opera or IE, they won't be supported in this code. Only WebKit will. This is much better, in which you include WebKit, you include Mozilla, you include Opera, and you include the standard one, so that 5 years from now, when it becomes standard, even then, it's supported, right? So this is the proper way to do CSS when it comes to vendor prefixes. Okay. With this, I'll say this is my Twitter, this is my email. If anyone wants to ask any questions, they can ask right now, or they can ask after the event as well, or offline. Yeah. Don't know. I'll have to see and check the specs. I'll get back to you. Boilerplate. Okay. So I'll have to see whether it's actually CSS3 or something just proposed by Apple. Because what happens sometimes is Apple comes up and doesn't tell anyone about anything. It will just completely implement something in CSS3 or CSS3 and just announce that we've done this. And every other browser is saying, okay, what the hell? We didn't know about this, right? And they say we did it first. Of course, we did it first. Right? So we'll have to see. I'll have to check on this. There is an MS one. It's used very, very rarely. IE in this case actually follows our model as well, which is use vendor prefixes as less as possible. So I think they have an MS vendor prefix, but they don't really use it that much.
Is there a star underscore that you used to use for IECs and
That's a hack. That's not standard, and that's Microsoft only. And I'm not from Microsoft. So I'll just talk about the specification.
That's because it does internally. This is what it actually creates to your that's a performance. That's a problem.
So, I mean, using jQuery is fine, but this is much more general thing. So, any more questions?
For example, this direction that is HTML5 document, right? We have various kinds of tags. So all these are supported. We can have canvas, dot, some class, and just like Texas in the style sheet, we use style to render HTML document. The same single way you can use.
Yeah, so all the new tags which come up, you'll use it the exact same way as you use normal HTML4 tags, for example. Yeah, these are a little bit like regular expressions, you could say, right? So the caret one and the star one. No, not fully. You can't do code like stuff, and you shouldn't. Right? Anything else?
CSS3 specification was meant to handle all the hacks that you were doing for a while.
One common thing, one important thing is no one CSS3 specification.
All the specifications basically are about dealing with the hacks we have been doing for years. But there are a few that we missed out. As a person who writes and codes CSS, I think there should be a specification for probably nested CSS as well.
Okay.
That is one of the examples.
So what you can do in that case, I mean, I'm sure you're not the only one. There are many people who share your pain, right? So what you can do is compile a list of things that you want and send it to the CSS working group for them to actually implement in the next version. They may not be aware of what your pains are, right? So actually have a document of what you actually want or propose, and they'll discuss it out amongst themselves, the CSS working group. One of my teammates is actually part of that group as well, so we can push it. Anyone else?
How different is it from
Media queries? Yeah.
How different is it from the device with the
It's not much different. The only thing is, device width will be, in my opinion, is not really supported apart from iPhone. I'm not really sure, at least in Opera it isn't, right? So the correct standard CSS3 way of doing it will be media queries.
instead of that we can use
Yeah, media queries. It's supported in iPhone as well.
media query also supports other kind of stuff like what media is based on and for.
That's not part of media queries.
That's what it's called in media query. Means what media is this page for.
Yeah, but that was in existence since long time.
Yeah. So this is an extension to the existing media query specification.
Yeah.
The existing specification was about if it's for print or it's for screen or something like that. Now we've added things like width and all to it.
Yeah.
That's it.
So, I mean, with media, with media queries, what he was talking about, the old one, you can also even specify, I want this thing for print, I want this thing for presentation. Everyone knows that. But the new stuff was, the new hotness was what I talked about.
because now when iPhone is there, now iPad is there. So different.
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So this will
Yes, it will work. Because the browser is the same, it supports the same problems. Right? I guess that's it. And if you have any more questions, one more question, last one. Yeah.
Any plugins for Eclipse with CSS3 support?
I'm not really sure about Eclipse. You'll have to talk about this with someone who is familiar with Eclipse or not. So I really don't know about that.
and CSS3 with 100%.
Yeah.
You give it right. So
Yeah.
normally,
Yeah, it's still.
you have to use this.
No. So if you say if I want this particular style to have to be between this device width and this device width, and it'll be applied to all those devices.
No, I'm not talking about the media queries.
Okay.
So just like if you see, right, a table can extend. So I'm not for tables, that's for sure. So if we use a liquid layout, so I want like all the things to be like it gets tedious when you use divs. Do you have any suggestions on CSS3 to overcome that, to scale up on the screen's width with all the modules?
Just use percentage, man. I mean, that's the only thing. With media queries, you can just say, I mean, you can't really say that, okay, I'm not really sure what exactly you want in that case. I mean,
So I have a left column, I have a right column.
yeah.
So normally what you do is you just take the body of the thing and give 100%.
Yeah.
So if I want everything to be scaled like on the screen, like I want a small div inside also, so I can do it using media query and give with 100%?
Yeah, you can.
Okay.
Attached to all the columns. So if I resize the window or like a device,
Did I actually show you the demo of media queries? Let me just show you the demo of media queries. If I can. Show you a demo. So as you can see over here, this is a standard 3-column layout, right? If I, let me just, yes. So if I change the width, then it becomes a 2-column layout. A different style is applied. If I change the width further, it becomes a 1-column layout. Because a different style is applied now.
So does it mean that each time page does both it, you all the three CSS,
No.
multiple CSS down
the whole point of media queries is you write just once in one CSS file. Don't separate it according to different files. Why do you want to do that? So just have one CSS file in which you say that okay, if it's this between this and this width, then have this style. If it's between this and this width, have that style. And whenever whichever device comes up with whichever resolution, that particular style will be applied. Any more questions? You can ask me offline, and I'm done. Thank you.